Hello there. In this video, we're going to talk about exponential smoothing. This is our third and final mathematical model that we use to determine the trend. I can tell you that exponential smoothing sounds kind of scary. It did to me at first, but it really isn't. In fact, exponential smoothing is more like a hybrid of the weighted moving average that we just talked about and incorporates the actual forecasted values into the forecast. I know, it's kind of weird. But inventory managers have been using this method for over 100 years when they were still penciling this stuff out by hand. No calculators, no Excel, none of that. So you should do just fine. And again, all you have to do is understand how it works and how it can be applied in your business. The only data input to the exponential smoothing calculation is the previous period's demand and what's known as a smoothing factor or a smoothing constant. Now, I know all this sounds really complicated, but it really isn't. So let's get to our first slide, and I'll show you how simple this actually is. So, exponential smoothing, not scary at all. The only data input to the exponential smoothing calculation is the previous period's demand, the previous period's forecast, and the smoothing factor, or the smoothing constant. So let's see what that even means in terms of numbers. The smoothing factor is a number between 0 and 1, kind of like the weighted moving average. It has rules. The weighted moving average, all three periods had to equal 1, but with the exponential smoothing, we need a number between 0 and 1. And that number is calculated to give weight to the most recent period's demand combined with the weight of the forecast for that period in order to produce the next period's forecast. Again, a mouthful, I get it, but it makes a lot of sense once you see it in action. And so what this does, as you can imagine, is it operates to smooth out the historical demand and the forecast combined. In this example, I'm using a smoothing factor of 0.3. Now, typically, my smoothing factors in real life are about a 0.7, 0.8, but I'm using a 0.3 in this particular example to find, as you know, what the answer is for month number 7. So now that we have our smoothing factor of 0.3, we need to first identify a previous period of demand and borrow that value to start the smoothing. So for month number 1, we're going to take 333 units and use that as month number 2's forecast. Interesting, isn't it? So now we've got two variables. We've got the smoothing factor of 0.3 and we've got a forecast for month number 2 of 333. Now this is how the math works. It looks a little intimidating. And I get that, but just don't fixate on that right now. Let's see how the numbers work, and then we'll make sense of this formula with the numbers we're familiar with. So here we have a formula that looks more manageable. Our smoothing factor times the actual sales demand of month 2, which is 233 units, plus the forecast demand, which we borrowed from the month before, multiplied by the number 1 minus the smoothing factor, which would give us a 0.7. So we have 70 plus 333 times 0.7, which comes out to 303. Now 303 is what's going to be put in the cell as a forecast for month number 3. We're going to continue to move forward until we can actually forecast month number 7. So let's see what that looks like. So like I said, we put 303 in for the forecast for month number 3, and then we just continue to extrapolate those values all the way until we get to month number 7, and month number 7 is quite low. And the forecast for month number 7 is 488, which intuitively is not enough. Now, like I said, I typically use a smoothing factor of 0.7 or 0.8. In this example, I used a 0.3 to show that exponential smoothing also operates in a certain respect like the weighted moving average because it's giving the last month of sales history more weight. Since I used a 0.3, that watered down the last sales month and gave us a pretty substantially low forecast. If we'd been using a 0.7 or a 0.8, it would have been a lot closer, and you're going to see that in upcoming videos. So that's exponential smoothing. It's kind of scary, but it's not really. To recap, you first come up with two values. One is you're going to borrow the demand from a preceding month. In this instance, we used month number 1's demand of 333, and we turned that into the forecast for month number 2. Then we used a smoothing factor we determined, 0.3, and we plugged it into the formula, which is very simple math. Again, we're doing it on a spreadsheet. You don't ever have to lift a finger or fill in a cell because the Inventory Boss program does all of this for you, but you need to see how this works. So which smoothing method works best? As you can see, we've come up with different values using the different methods. and you need to see what works best for you. So that's going to do it for this particular video. I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we discuss lagging and bias and error corrections. Thanks for watching. Inventory Boss helps e-commerce sellers increase profitability by balancing their business through solid inventory management best practices. Visit inventoryboss.com today and get all of our training and the use of our cloud-based software for an initial price of only $10 for the first 30 days. Get started today.